talked to Palestinians one-on-one who confided in how they're absolutely horrified by the taking of women and children and how, as hostages, the treatment of even of those soldiers we saw in this video. What we didn't see in this video was a Hamas fighter bragging that these are our sabaya, which is Islamist doctrine for sex slaves. So there are many in Gaza and throughout the Palestinian territories and the diaspora, like I said, who despise Hamas, who stand against them, but they're fragmented, they're afraid, they are unable to speak out. And that's my hope, is to create a new political home where you can be supportive of our people's just and urgent aspirations for independence and peace and statehood, while also being against Hamas and Islamism.
Thank you so much. My next question is to you, Stephen. You know, Iran and its primary proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas, are a major threat to Israel and the United States, and in fact, the entire world. What are the current threats from Iran and its proxies?
Well, thank you for having me here. Iran, a wonderful country, wonderful cultured people, unfortunately under the rule of a maniacal theocratic regime since 1979, racing toward nuclear weapons. And by the way, if the original Iran nuclear deal were still in effect, it would expire anyway next year because it expired in 2025. Racing for nuclear weapons, planting proxy groups to surround Israel with what Iran calls the so-called axis of resistance. Hezbollah in Lebanon, armed with over 100,000 missiles, rockets, cruise missiles that can strike any target from Haifa to Beersheba and everything in between. The Houthis in Yemen, armed with Iranian cruise missiles and drones, shooting at it a lot. By the way, Aqaba is right next to Eilat, and I understand unofficially that Aqaba has been saved from hits by Houthi missiles several times by the Israelis over the last few months. Iranian proxies in Iraq, right next door, in January of this year, attacked a United States military base in northeastern Jordan with drones, killing 3 U.S. service members and wounding 40, some of whom quite seriously. Is Iran a threat to Israel? Of course it is. Iran has sworn to destroy Israel. Iran saw the pieces on the chessboard, Daphna, the Abraham Accords, the negotiations last year that could have led to a deal between Saudi Arabia, Israel, the U.S., and the Palestinians, a package deal whereby the U.S. would enter into a defense pact with Saudi Arabia. The Israelis would recognize a path forward toward Palestinian statehood, and Saudi Arabia would normalize with Israel, establish diplomatic relations. The one party that did not want that to happen was Iran. And the Wall Street Journal reported shortly after October 7th that it was Iran that gave the green light to Hamas to commit these horrific crimes on October the 7th. Who has benefited from this war more than any other country? It's Iran. Iran is a threat to Israel, and Iran is also a threat to American interests. And by the way, and I'll stop here, Daphna, Iran launched hundreds of missiles and drones in Israel just a couple of months ago. We all remember that night, that horrible night. The first ever direct Iranian attack against Israel. What if one of those rockets had pierced through the Iron Dome and struck the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem? You know who would have been blamed. Not Iran. They would have said the Israelis did it. We came very close to World War III that night. That is why the United States of America is equally under threat from Iran. This is an issue that has got to be dealt with, Daphna.
Thank you. You know, one of the questions obviously on everybody's mind is Israel is being attacked from the north, and it's always in threat of Hamas now from every direction. So what do you think is the reality in the very near future?
Daphna, I've been in Israel twice in the last 8 weeks. The mood, as many of you who have been there will verify, is very bleak. The fate of the hostages is hanging over the country every minute of every day. And while I was there, and I've been been there more than 40 times in my life. I have a huge family there. For the first time, I heard some of my military friends, military relatives, genuinely worried about a Hezbollah massive strike on the center of Tel Aviv, on the center of Haifa, on the heavily populated areas of Israel. The threat of a Hezbollah attack launching thousands of rockets simultaneously, which Hamas proved on October the 7th when they launched 5,000 rockets simultaneously and overwhelmed portions of the Iron Dome. What if Hezbollah were to fire 25,000 or 30 or 40,000? How many thousands of dead would we have in the populated central portion of Israel? For the first time in my life, I heard grave, grave worry about that possibility. That's different from what we had in June of 1967. It's different from what we had in October of 1973 because the very heart of Israel's civilian population is under threat. People are quite worried about that, Daphne.
Arthur Brock, Romanian to Iran. Stupid American policy. Please talk about it. You guys think whatever happened in the Middle East, we have to blame you.
Excuse me, sir, could I continue with the questions? I really appreciate your patience. Thank you. My next question is, obviously, this is very emotional for so many people around the world. But through it all, everything that we've seen on television, on media, something horrific has been growing, which is anti-Semitism, and actually increased racism as well. My question is to you, Roz. You've been working with all the universities, trying to educate people and students and professors against any kind of racism and any kind of discrimination and anti-Semitism. Please explain, what is this, what is happening here? What is going to happen, and what do we do about it?
I think, first of all, thank you, Daphne, for putting the evening together and for everything you've done. Thank you, Rabbi Barron, for hosting. And thank you for having me on the panel. I think we can all see and read about the encampments and the reaction to October 7th, which was unexpected, really. We watched the film, we got a glimpse of what happened, and so everybody thought Jewish students would return to college campuses after the holidays, after October 7th, and maybe be supported. And when they returned, unfortunately, they got a very big, bad surprise. There was not only non-support, but there were rallies that were, promoting Hamas. There were flags, Hamas flags, and Hezbollah flags, and then the encampments, and a lot of discrimination against Jewish students and Israeli students. So not only did they not get the kind of support that one might predict, but they got quite the opposite. And statements like resistance, terrorism is not resistance. So, I'm sorry, terrorism, resistance is not terrorism. Thank you. And so resistance is not terrorism. So everything we saw on October the 7th, including the rapes, including the torture, including the kidnapping, and by the way, I just want to say, we should all hold in our hearts that there are 120 hostages still being held as we sit here on this stage, and we know for a fact that 44 are dead.